Hello students, welcome to my channel Somalin's World. So today I am going to discuss about the process of synaptic transmission. In the previous video I have already discussed about the structure and function of neuron and how an impulse moves through a neuron. But here in this class we will discuss about how an impulse moves from one neuron to the next neuron. As we know that a neuron, it may be ends at another neuron or it may end at a muscle or at a gland also. So here in this video I will discuss about how one neuron sends or transmits the impulse to the next neuron. So again we will recall the previous talks. So as we know that when one neuron it captures the impulse, then it captures through this dendrite, and the dendrite it send the impulse to this cell body, and this cell body it again send it to the axon, and from this axon finally it comes to the axon terminals, which are also known as the synaptic node, and this is the function of one neuron. But when the impulse it has to transmit to another neuron, then here it forms a junction with the dendrite of another neuron, and here the first neuron it shows I have drawn here in green color, and the second neuron I have drawn here in the red color. So when the impulse it moves from one neuron to the next neuron, then here it comes through a gap or a junction which is known as synapse. So what is synapse? So this is a junction at which one neuron communicate with another neuron or a muscle or a gland. So this junction is known as the synapse, and this gap is very much negligible and which is very much microscopic, and the microscopic gap which is also known as the synaptic cleft. So here the first neuron it will, or the synaptic node of first neuron, we can say it as the presynaptic neuron, or it as it send the message, then so it is also known as the sending neuron, and the second neuron which accept the impulse, that is known as the receptor neuron or the postsynaptic neuron. So in this process, one neuron sends the impulse from one neuron to the next neuron. So here I have drawn a big diagram of this synaptic or this synapse. So I have already talked that the junction at which one neuron communicates with another neuron. So this is the ending of the first neuron, which is known as the synaptic node or the axon terminal, and it is also known as the presynaptic node, and here this second one is known as the postsynaptic neuron. So when an impulse comes through this presynaptic neuron, here you can see the outer membrane of this axon is positively charged and the inner membrane is negatively charged in resting stage. But when an impulse comes, this potential it changes. So the outside of the membrane it becomes negative and the inside becomes positive. So after crossing in a part, then it moves to forward, and when it moves forward, again the changed potential it again come to its rest, and again it become the outside become positive and again the inside become negative. So in this manner an axon potential moves through the axon forward in a forward direction. So when it reaches, finally it reaches to this synaptic nerve arch, the synaptic nerve they contains the synaptic vesicles, and these synaptic vesicles these red color round structures are the synaptic vesicles, and they contain the neurotransmitter. So when an impulse comes through this axon and reached the synaptic nerve, then as the permeability of the membrane of the axon changes, so here some calcium channels are present. Upon reaching of this impulse to this nerve, the calcium channels they open and they move the calcium to inside. So the concentration of calcium increased inside the nerve, and they bind with these synaptic vesicles, and they push these synaptic vesicles towards the surface of the membrane, and finally they rupture and release the neurotransmitters in the gap or in the synaptic cleft. And these neurotransmitters, they have receptors which are present on the surface of the postsynaptic neuron. So these are the receptors. When the impulse it comes to the presynaptic neuron, then the electrical charge it convert into chemical charge. So they are released in the form of neurotransmitter into the synaptic cleft, and then this synaptic cleft upon binding with these receptors, the receptors they become active, and again the chemical signal it converted into again into electrical signal, and the postsynaptic neuron it shows its action. So in this way one neuron it transmits the impulse to the next neuron. So here after reaching the impulse into the postsynaptic neuron, it again transmits the impulse to the next neuron, or it may be a muscle or a gland. So in this way the synapse it transmits the impulse from one neuron to the next neuron, and the synapse is the junction of the presynaptic neuron, the postsynaptic neuron, and the synaptic cleft. So the whole synapse it comprises of presynaptic neuron, the postsynaptic neuron, and the synaptic cleft. And here I have forgotten one thing, that these are the mitochondrions which are present, and it gives energy during this transmission. As here this is an active process and it needs energy, so this mitochondria supports for the energy when it has to be released to this synaptic cleft. So in this way one neuron sends the impulse to the next neuron. So in the previous video I will discuss about the types of neurons. So thank you for today.